with a round of applause, let's welcome Gbenga. He has been a proud supporter and sponsor, and then he doesn't only support virtually, if I can say anything like that. He doesn't just support with intangible things like showing support or encouraging you. He also supports financially. So Gbenga, we can't stop thanking you. But in this session, we are going to have you take us through digital rights, but we just want you to know that we acknowledge you and we are always happy, we are always proud. And then when our fellows follow you on LinkedIn, then we are all happy. So thank you one more time. Over to you now.
All right, thank you very much. And I hope you can hear me and I hope you can see the presentation.
Yes, please. We can,
Awesome.
for both.
All right. Okay, so we've I have a hard stop at 2 p.m. local time, which is your 1 p.m. So it means we have 45 minutes. But don't worry, this is just a start of the conversation. I'll make my email address available so you can talk to me and we can take the conversation from there. So why digital rights? I know that, earlier we were talking about all kinds of rights, and I'm sure that people are, asking themselves, why focus on digital rights in particular? Well, considering the fact that, think of when you woke up this morning, between then and now, what are the things you've done? Almost everything you've done, except your snacks, you've done digitally. When you woke up, you checked the time on your phone. Some of us don't even have watches anymore. I still have, but you're tempted to look more at your phone. In fact, some of you woke up with the alarm on your phone. When you got ready and wanted to move, you quickly checked your messages. In fact, when you were going to look for someone, you sent them a message. And it's because our lives are now wrapped around those devices. In fact, some people sleep off with their phones in their hand, and then they wake up with their phone in their hand, and then they look at it and continue. Hopefully, we're not too much like that, because that sounds like an addiction. You sleep off and your phone is in your hand like this, and then you wake up and then you continue, like a robot. So why digital rights? Because the internet has introduced new spaces and the online environment has gone really mainstream. Everything we do now is virtual. I'm talking to you virtually. I typically would be in the room, but even though it's impossible today for logistics reasons, I'm still there. Some of you, all of you, as part of this fellowship, when you started, what you had to do was to join virtually. And so gone are the days where people thought digital was only for the geeks or for only those who are special people. Right now, various interest groups, including politicians, including military people, including civil society organizations, including medical people, know the impact of digital, digital devices, digital tools, digital platforms. And there's also an emergence of a culture of control online. So many years ago, if you wrote something in the newspaper and a powerful person, some of you don't have any experience of military dictatorship in Africa at all. Some of you have, maybe some of you have read about it, but in those days, if a military dictator didn't want you to read anything in the newspapers, it depends on how they woke up in the morning. If they woke up, their wives were nice to them and they woke up very nice and they feel good, they will order that all copies of that newspaper or magazine be bought, if they are nice. So you won't even get to read it. But if they're not feeling nice, they will just, let's say they were, their wife upset them, called them a lazy man before they slept, they'll just wake up and say, go and seize all those copies. Don't even pay, for it. And of course, that's changed now. With one tweet, with one LinkedIn post, you can literally, and I'll show you a video as we continue, of what one tweet that leads to one video show can, lead to in advocacy. Democratic participation is also helped by the online space. You have elections at the end of the year in Ghana. You know for a fact that people are not going to wait listening to the radio like our fathers did to know what the results of the elections are. No, they are going to know from the polling unit and they will be sharing it and tweeting it. And of course, The reason we're having this conversation is because we know that rights exist in the Constitution, in various laws, but at times, these rights are not respected. And so we have to enforce it. But there's so many digital rights, and I cannot focus on all of them. Someone asked earlier, asking, what was my background for me to be able to focus on digital rights now? I am not a lawyer. No, I am not. I studied engineering and electrical engineering, to be precise. And I focused on the communications aspect of it. So I graduated, with a communications focus in electrical engineering. But over the years, I got interested in policy. Why am I saying that? It doesn't matter what you graduated with, from agriculture to zoology, it doesn't matter. What matters is your interest and the skills you pick as you continue. Does my engineering degree become useless? No. My engineering degree is absolutely useful in digital rights, because when I talk about data privacy, when I talk about surveillance, when I talk about freedom of expression, I'm able to use my engineering mind and the engineering concepts I understand around how the internet works, around OSI layers and things like that, to interpret policy issues. So we'll focus on just 3 areas. One is data privacy, the other, or protection. They don't mean exactly the same thing, but I will focus more on data privacy today. The other is surveillance. And the third is freedoms generally. Freedom of expression, freedom of association, and others. But let's go very quickly to look at data privacy. It's a fundamental right. If you're Ghanaian, or if you are in one of 38 African countries, it means that your country has a law that is called Right to Information Law, Access to Information Law, what's it called? But particularly, your country has what is called a data protection or data privacy law, mostly data protection, as it is called in many countries. And in fact, in many other countries, you also have privacy rights in the Constitution. So I mentioned 38 earlier deliberately. Those are the number of countries in Africa that have data privacy laws as at today, as at this morning. That number may become 39 tomorrow. It may become 55, all countries, but it is 38 as of this morning. The last time I was with you, this number was 35. 3 countries have since have laws signed since then. And also for the entire African country, we had been chasing what was what we know as the Malabo Convention. Typically, these conventions are named after the location where the meeting held. It is called the Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. It is now ratified because last year, number of countries required 15 to ratify has now taken the instrument, even though it is created by the African Union, they've taken it back to their countries, they've signed it, and they've agreed that it is a regional law. Even though we have all those laws, we have a lot of challenges. Some of them are because, I don't know how many of you have seen this before. Let me show you a picture. Can you see this picture? How many of you have seen government offices like this? This is from a court of law in a city. Forget the Arsenal jersey, it is not in the UK or somewhere in Europe. And this was in a court. In this pile of documents, you have files of people who have been convicted of crimes and whose evidence and judges' writings are there. If you steal some of the documents here, you can bungle the case. But unfortunately, many of our schools, hospitals, government institutions still store data like this. So even if nobody wants to abuse the data or no one wants to violate the rights you have through the data, rats and other rodents will abuse your data. But of course, because we have this legacy abuse, we also have excuses given by certain governments to say, well, we have security problems, so let us find out and collect biometric information of everyone. Many times, biometric information is collected before data protection laws or data privacy laws are made available, which makes it problematic. And of course, it then means that many times data is lost or data is abused and there are no consequences. And I will not make this theoretical. I will show you a short 1.5 minute video of a TV interview that I held following a tweet. Paradigm Initiative uncovered a major data breach in Nigeria. It is still an ongoing conversation. And we then posted, we had a press conference, and we posted a tweet to basically say what I'm about to share with you in this video. I hope the audio works well. So take a listen.
It's not just that there's a data breach, it's that there is another data breach. So Express Verify was the one that they talked about in March. And we did report it, thanks to FIJ, it was revealed. We reported this to the Data Protection Commission. And well, I'm not surprised that NIMSIG got a slap on the wrist. And that, of course, means that they were, willing to look away again. And this is now, Express Verify went offline. And now this is anyverify.com.ng. And guess what? That's not the only one. AnyVerify is now offline again because there's noise about it, but there are many more. In fact, in that press statement, NIMSI itself tied its own hands by saying, we know there are many websites. And the problem is not Nigerian citizens. That press statement is silly, at least, because it suggests that it is Nigerians who are giving their own data to this false or fake websites. But no, this is NIMSI's data, and we now have proof. We got the name slip of the minister, Dr. Bosun Tijani. We got the name slip of the #1 data regulator in Nigeria, Dr. Vincent Olatunji. We bought them for 100 naira each to demonstrate that this is not a joke.
Okay.
It's not just that there's a data breach, it's that there is another.
I showed you that video. I don't know if everyone, could hear the words clearly. That is ongoing in Nigeria as I speak. In fact, tomorrow, myself and a few of my colleagues and some of our partners are going to Abuja, which probably explains some of the logistics challenges I mentioned. I have to be in Abuja to have a meeting with the minister in charge of the agency whose data got abused. A private sector company got access to the national database in Nigeria. The Management Commission, National Management Commission, says they don't know this company did not get the data from them. So that company either got it illegally through the black market, or they got it through another party that has access to the national database, and they were selling information of Nigerians for 100 naira each. That is 6 cents, not Ghanaian cedis cents. 6 US dollar cents or 100 naira. You can convert that into any currency. It is cheap in any currency. And so, to demonstrate how serious the issues are, we looked for and found 2 slips belonging to 1, a minister, and 2, the Director General of the National Data Protection Commission, because that's the only way we could prove to them that this is happening. And now everyone from this minister to that minister are calling and saying, let's meet, let's talk. You shouldn't do it like this. It is a national embarrassment and things like that. But guess what? One of the problems that we have on this continent is that governments and other institutions don't pay attention until they hear about lawsuits, which we have instituted, or they see technical proof. By the way, you can see again where my engineering background comes to play, where I'm able to understand not just the policy side of things, but the engineering side of things. And as we have that conversation tomorrow, obviously, I'm sure that we will not only talk policy, we'll also talk a bit of engineering. But let me move very quickly to surveillance and interception, since we have 35 minutes more. So, one of the reasons that governments give for surveillance is terrorism, or national security, or state morality. The last one is even more upsetting, but let's leave it for a second. Let's talk about terrorism. Terrorism is a valid problem. It is so valid that countries like Kenya are beginning to export their police to go outside the continent to Haiti and other countries to help them with gangsterism or terrorism. Same thing, Rwanda is helping in other countries on the continent. And some governments then say, because there's terrorism, we must do surveillance. We must find out what Raymond is doing when he's at home. We need to know who he's sending text messages to. Unfortunately, many times this is illegal. Now, don't get me wrong. There's something called lawful surveillance or lawful interception. Those of you who are lawyers in the room know about lawful interception or surveillance that is not illegal. In that case, someone has committed a crime, you get a court judgment or a court warrant that allows you to follow them and find out what they're doing because they have committed a crime, or you've proved to the judge beyond reasonable doubt that this person is about to blow up the National Assembly with a bomb, and so you're following them. But many times, that's not what snooping does in many governments. Many politicians just use this to follow their rivals and find out what their rivals are doing. One of the funniest cases in Nigeria is someone like myself who began to do some work in the community, and then they were like, this guy is going on TV a lot, he's doing so many things. Does he have political ambitions? And then someone told the governor, please start tracking this guy. And then the governor decided to start surveillance on this potential opponent. This guy has no political ambition. He's just doing a non-profit project, but simply because they thought he was interested in politics, they began to snoop. Of course, that is illegal. Why? Because surveillance in itself, even when termed legal, must conform to 3 basic principles in law. Number 1 is a principle of legality. Is it legal? Do you have court-backed documents to allow you to tap someone's phone or to check things that you don't have access to? So it must be legal. Number 2 is that it must be necessary. Necessity means you must prove to the court, you must convince everyone involved that there is no other way to get this information. There is no other way to prove this crime or this incident apart from surveillance. That's a tough one. The third one is even tougher. It is the principle of proportionality. It means that if the crime is level 2 out of 100, surveillance is not necessary. It means that you have to convince the judge that this crime is level 70 and above, in which case it is so serious that surveillance must be involved. Now, because of all these different things, data protection problems, surveillance challenges, and I'll talk a bit about freedom of expression and association and things like that. Because of that, one of the things that we started doing at Paradigm Initiative many years ago, 2013 to be precise, was to start thinking, what do we want? We don't want illegal surveillance. We don't want unlawful interception. We don't want data leaks. What do we want? And then we came up with this idea based on something that we saw from Brazil. Brazil had what was called at the time, and what is still called the Marco Civil, which is basically the law for the digital era. And so we borrowed from this idea and a few other ideas and drafted what I wrote an article at the time called Internet Freedom Declaration for Nigeria, and then we moved on to turn it into a document called the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill, the draft bill. So we drafted the bill, gave it to a legislator because as a private member, he can submit this bill. And this, by the way, is one of the challenges I'll make to you. If you want digital rights to happen in your country, there are a few things you can do. One of them is to look at the existing laws and make comments to make sure that if it is doing the wrong thing, if the cybercrime law in Ghana, if there's a proposal for a new electronic levy and things like that, and you don't believe it is the right thing, you think it will reduce the number of people that have access to the internet, then you should make comments. Democracy is about public participation and the contest of the best ideas. If your idea is silent, you can't compete with that of the existing government. The Digital Rights and Freedom Bill is now being discussed. It was passed in Nigeria in 2019. The president refused to sign it, and the journey continues again. So the bill is now back in Parliament again, and it's been introduced in different process at different stages, some of them still being drafted, some of them already talking to legislators in Cameroon, in Malawi, in Tanzania, and in Zambia. Basically, notices, you must notify if you want to carry out surveillance, you must compensate if you're wrong, because there are cases where there's a case of a Somali citizen who was accused of terrorism in Kenya and was being surveilled, and they found out eventually that this guy is not guilty. Unfortunately, because his name was tied to terrorism, he can't get a job again for the rest of his life because everybody is going to say that's a terrorist. So for such things, you need to give compensation. He can't work again for the rest of his life. So it is you're the one that made the mistake, so you're going to pay him for the rest of his life. Well, lucky him, even though he can't get his name back, but at least he can get money from that government. And of course, also the conditions. What are the conditions for surveillance? Legality, necessity, proportionality. Of course, interception must be lawful with clear judicial oversight that give guidelines to avoid abuse. Otherwise, anybody who has, and you and I know that at a certain level in your career, judges, you have access to judges. And some of them, unfortunately, I hate to say, are corrupt. And so you can easily convince them either through inducement or emotional blackmail to give you a warrant and say, okay, I'm a judge, I approve it. You can go and do interception on this person's mobile phone. You can listen to their phone calls. But to avoid such abuse, it must have clear guidelines. Of course, we know that governments across the continent are investing heavily in surveillance and monitoring technology equipment without guidelines. Some of them you will see in the report that we released in April. It's called the Londa Report, the Digital Rights and Inclusion Report on the African continent. And I'll tell you the link where you can find that in a moment. But before then, let me talk about expression, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, and freedom of association. And I'm hoping to have the last at least 10 minutes at the end of this presentation, speak for 35 and have some 10 minutes to answer questions. Everyone has a right to freely express themselves. And even after such expression, of course, many of us know Idi Amin, who is popular for saying something. To be honest, we don't know if he said it, but I mean, it was in the movie and we like it. Someone came to see Idi Amin and said, "Oh, sir, is it true that in Uganda, nobody has freedom of expression?" And someone stopped them. No. You have freedom of expression. And then they were jubilating and he said, "Pause. But after expression, you can go to jail." So freedom of expression, but after expression, you could be jailed. I mean, that sounds like a joke, but in reality, that's what happens in many of our countries. Somebody posts a tweet and makes a comment. Somebody goes on a radio station, says something, they record it, share the podcast, it goes in WhatsApp groups, and the person is speaking the truth about a member of parliament who stole money to marry an extra wife and buy a car. It is true, but because this person is powerful and have access to the black uniformed police, they use that to harass and to arrest them. In many of our countries, the biggest victims of cybercrime or related laws are bloggers and journalists, and increasingly citizens on social media who are active and popular, and people don't like what they're saying. But of course, this right to freely express independent opinion must be respected. Not only must it be respected, it must be protected. We know for a fact that some governments are now using different things apart from, so it is no longer about, picking someone up because they've said something. I mean, back in the day, the Secret Service will come to my office to drop a letter or come Gestapo style to come and say, we want to arrest. They don't do much of that, anymore. Once in a while, they could still try to intimidate, but now they introduce taxes like Uganda. Uganda introduced taxes to keep people away from the internet because the president, Museveni, M7, Mr. You want another rap, basically said, these young people are just using the internet to gist and to do immoral things. Let's get them off the internet, because obviously they were asking questions and saying things he didn't like. And as a man who believes he is the savior of the modern Uganda, he wasn't going to have any of that. So they introduced taxes, and 5 million people dropped off the internet that year. Governments also use disruptions Just like in Kenya, just last week, actually, in Kenya, during the protests, people started noticing the internet slowing down. Safaricom has now said, oh, there was a cable cut. The company that is supposed to know if the cable cut or not has said, no, there was no cable cut. Now the jury is out there, but we will go to court and find out exactly what happened. Many countries across the continent, Ethiopia shutting down the internet because they don't want people to know what is happening in one of the regions in their country. Zimbabwe is shutting down the internet to punish people for complaining about, so it's funny. Some organizations went to court to sue government for shutting down the internet, and to punish them for going to court, the government shut the internet down again, as if to teach them a lesson. Some dictators are terrible. And unfortunately, the end of them is always very clear. From Yahya Jammeh in the Gambia to, what's his name again, in Zimbabwe? I can't even remember his name right now, Mugabe. It is very clear. You can't be there forever. And there are some of them who are still in certain countries with letter R or other letters who need to remember that when they are gone, stories will be told of the things that they did. They're also using new laws. In Nigeria, at some point, there was a new bill called a frivolous petitions bill. And part of our work across the continent is to look at many of these ridiculous proposals by parliaments across the continent. And some of them are just straightforward to just punish people for having the audacity to ask questions from their governments. Every citizen, including security agents, because they will one day stop being security agents, must enjoy rights provided for by the law. I love to discuss with security agencies. And funny enough, I remember Raymond asking me that he would like to see, as part of my presentation, to please talk about my conversation with the police many years ago. And we still do that, by the way. We train, various institutions. We train parliamentarians, we train judges, we train security agencies, including the police and some other, agencies. I remember coming to the office today, this morning. I stopped because I saw some policemen doing some very funny things. And I called one of them to have a chat with him. To say, listen, we've had this conversation with you from the top, from Commissioner of Police to the last person. You cannot on a weekday morning be stopping people randomly just because you want to collect a bribe. For some reason, he was very polite and kind because he believed he was talking to a senior official in government. And I introduced myself. Now, I'm not a government official. I am an ordinary citizen. But of course, he wasn't convinced. I think somewhere in his mind, he was thinking, this man must be a big man in the police that is trying to catch me. So he was being polite with me. But interesting enough, when we do train them, the conversations go in many directions. In fact, there are times when the conversations become arguments. Let me show you a few pictures. So many years ago, we started this conversation, training the police. Beside him, you can see the plainclothes police, which is usually the Secret Service. And I was trying to explain about digital rights and why it is important. He would have none of it. No. What is this rights you people are always talking about? Why do you want us to respect rights when people are doing criminal things? And then I explained to him, okay, look, this rights you don't want to respect, one day it will be your turn. You won't be in government and somebody will abuse your rights. Who will defend you? And I continued to explain. And I think he began to listen, especially when I told the story of a former national security advisor in Nigeria who thought we were very stupid when we were telling him to respect rights. And then when he lost his role, he was arrested and sent to jail. His name is Colonel Dasuki. He released a press statement asking for the rights, his own rights to be respected. And I made a joke in the office. I said, let's sue this man for plagiarism, since the exact words we use in our own original press statements are the same words he is using now. And the policeman who I was talking to became a bit more interested. And I think it was useful because a few months later, guess what happened? He became the PRO for the police in Anambra State, Southeast Nigeria. And one of the first things he did in June, this training was, I think, in March. One of the first things he did in June when he was appointed was to release a press statement to respect digital rights of citizens. And of course, they loved him for it because it was different. Let me very quickly talk about the sort of digital rights in Africa. Thankfully, even though there are many bad things happening, there are also some good things. But one of the bad things that we've seen is, I mentioned earlier, the shutdowns, internet shutdowns, not just shutdowns, taxes, introduction, new laws, e-levy, just to slow things down. But in spite of that, citizens are pushing back. And there are legal victories. Just Reporting on Africa, which I will talk to you about at the end of my presentation today, is a platform that allows you to report across the continent in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Senegal, from Algeria to Zimbabwe. You can go on the platform, Reporting on Africa, and report any violation of your rights. And when you do, we help you by supporting with a legal support team. We just did that for one person whose bank in an African country, her data was misused by a bank. They used it to open an account that she didn't want, and she suspected they were going to use it for fraud and things like that. She sued them, and guess what? She won. The equivalent of 8 million naira has been awarded to her. Many times when you keep quiet, you suffer in silence. We have improved participation in policy processes, in policy making. Many of you are now fellows of GhanaSIG because of your interest. This year, we studied 26 countries in our Londa report. And apart from Angola, DRC, that's Congo, Kinshasa this time, Gambia and Namibia, because I know some people mix up their Congos. They mix up Congo Brazzaville, which is Republic of the Congo, and Congo Kinshasa, which is Democratic Republic of the Congo. We look, and apart from those 4 countries, 22 countries are actually implementing universal services funds, which are monies collected from the private sector to improve internet access and development in various countries. You can go to londa.africa. That's a URL you want to write down. Londa, L-O-N-D-A. Londa, by the way, is a Zulu word that means protect. Paradigm Initiative is proudly African. Many of you who have seen me before know that this is what I look like all the time. African prints, which, by the way, I almost always speak somewhere very close to you there, not too far from you in Osu. The Wooden Store is one of my favorite places to shop on the continent, because we're African and we are proud of it, and we have no excuse. I mean, we have no apologies at all that we're African. So many of our projects, you will see Londa, you will see Ayeta, you will see Reporti. Londa is a Zulu word, it means protect. Ayeta is a Yoruba word that means bulletproof. Reporti is a Swahili word that means report. So you can check Londa.Africa for the 26 country reports. They're available in English and in French. The Ghana report is also available for those of you who are very interested in quickly reading just 21 pages of Ghana report or thereabout, instead of reading the 400 pages of all the 26 countries. One thing we also do, and I'll show you very quickly in less than a minute, a short clip from the film that we made based on our 2022 report. The 2023 report and 2024 report will also be converted into a short film. We've been doing this. This is the 4th. We've produced our 4th film now, which is the one I'm about to show you the trailer. And we always do this because nobody wants to read 400-page reports. But we know that there's a generation of young people who will not read those reports. So we make these short films. We convert 400 pages into 20-odd minutes. So you can watch, enjoy, and talk about it. And of course, we've won many awards, but today is not to talk about the awards. It's basically to say that this is how we've interpreted the report from 2022. Take a listen for a few seconds.
Hello, Omar.
Who's that?
We know about your sister, but you cannot give her to our captors. Look, the government knows the power of the internet, correct? And that's why they've stretched people like you that create the tools and the software they need to frustrate its freedom.
Please sign here and indicate your dates for the product display and final handover.
I told you there was no reasoning with these people.
Please can stop, Christian.
Hello, Omar.
So that is on the site. And I know, okay, no, you're not going to watch it again. That is on the site, the latest short film. If you want to watch it, very simple. Go to our website, paradigmhq.org. You'll see our short film there, and you can easily watch it. We put all this together so that we can have different conversations around it, and also another way of creative communications around many of these reports. What can you do? One, well, you can watch the film, yes, but apart from that, you need to know the status of your country when it comes to digital rights. Is your country respecting rights, or your country backsliding? If you know, then you can also protect yourself. How do you protect yourself? You protect yourself by making sure you're protected online. Very quick one, passwords. If any of you if you are still using birthdays, named of loved ones or your crushes, name of children, named of parents as your passwords, change them today. Because it's not safe. Because you're susceptible to attacks. So you can use your local language. If you use a password in Nga, in Twi, in Yoruba, in Swahili, and it is acceptable. Spaces are acceptable as passwords. Any language, as long as you can type it on the keyboard, is acceptable as a password. So change your password. But beyond that, there are also many things we can ask. We advise you to do. Go to IATA.Africa. There are a trinity of websites. London to know the status. IATA.Africa to protect yourself. Don't forget, I said earlier that IATA is a Yoruba word that means bulletproof. And if things still go wrong, somebody misuses your data, your government shuts down the internet or does something stupid, report. Everybody, report anybody. Private sector, anyone, reports them on Reporting.Africa, and working with the various groups that are in partnership with Paradigm Initiative will help you, get redress. Don't forget that the best form of defense is attack. So at times, you want to also get involved in advocacy. One of the things about the internet governance process is that it allows you to get involved. You realize this after your GhanaSIG, and you now start attending. Some of you may, I don't know, if some of you will be at the West Africa IGF next week in Dakar, or at the Africa IGF later in the year in South Africa, or at the Global IGF in Saudi Arabia. There's an idea coming to my head now, which I will discuss with your executives. Maybe, who knows, maybe we could find some funding to support the best graduating fellow, maybe the fellow. When we find the fellow, maybe we can find a way of getting that fellow to actually actively participate at the Internet Governance Forum. Maybe not in the one this year, maybe one next year. Who knows? We'll talk about that. Please remind me, Sarata and Raymond, let's talk a bit about that. For advocacy, you can review laws for red flags. You can prevent bad bills by speaking up against them. Remember, Kenyan Gen Zs went on the streets, not only on the streets, online, to also say, reject the finance bill. Document and report incidents. Go to Reporting.Africa. Use that platform. You can use litigation. At times, even for nuisance value. Many times in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Senegal, in any country where we are involved in lawsuits, at times we know we may not win the case, but we will bring attention to the issue so that everyone can discuss it. Of course, get familiar with relevant documents. I'm glad that I'm the first person to speak to you this year, because one of the things that you must now pay attention to as you listen to the other people who will come to talk to you is all of the documents they share with you. Please note them. Global Digital Compact, Internet We Want, WSIS Plus 20. They may sound very confusing to you now, but just write them down and keep checking them out, because in 5 years, you'll be the one we'll be listening to for what to do next. Of course, you can also propose positive rights bills like Digital Rights and Freedom Bill that I mentioned earlier. But I want to close the curtain on this today. This is reporting. Reporting allows you to report violations. Once the report is made, it is verified. Once it is verified, by the way, this was relaunched in Accra just in April. So it's not, not too far from you there. And once it's verified, a lawyer is attached to the case, follows up with the person. You can also report anonymously. The only problem with anonymous reports is that there's no way to follow up with the person. But guess what? It's okay. You can spotlight the issues and we will take it from there. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this has been useful. I was only able to spare 7 minutes. I was hoping to be able to spare 10 minutes for you to ask questions. So maybe I can take 2 questions and then the conversation will continue from here. My email address is right there in front of you, gbenga.sesan@paradimehq.org. If you have any questions whatsoever about internet governance, shoot an email. Thank you so much. Questions?
Hello. Hello. Yeah. I want to make this very quick. I have 2 questions. My name is Eric. Yeah. So if you could break down, if you say unlawful surveillance and interception, and if you can add example, maybe 1 scenario or something. And the second one is the digital rights. Are we considering our original base, or we are just accepting digital rights as in whatever that is done globally, or we are also considering what is being done in a regional base? Then we'll add it. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so illegal surveillance and legal surveillance. I tried to explain this a bit, and I'll just do it very quickly. To say that those 3 tests are what you need to apply to know whether it is legal or illegal. Is it supported by law? If it is not supported by law, case closed, it is illegal. Throw it out the window or attack it. If it is supported by law, question again is it necessary? If it is supported by law but not necessary, then throw it away. If it's supported by law but necessary, the top test is it proportionate? Imagine the difference between, let's say, a child wants to sit on a chair and then someone removes the chair and they fall down. And then you blame the child and say, why did you fall down? You want to hurt yourself? And then you start beating the child. Of course, that's not proportionate. And that's what we mean. So I hope that presents at least a form of response to your first question about the legality or legality otherwise of surveillance. The second one is about digital rights. You said, should we accept what is being done globally or do what we have regionally? Okay, now globally means including Ghana, including Africa. That it is done in DC or Paris or London doesn't make it global. What makes it global is if it is done everywhere in the world. So when I talk about digital rights, by the way, and I've had this argument with the likes of Paul Kagame and co, who say digital rights or human rights is a Western agenda. And I ask them a very simple question. Number 1, what does Ubuntu mean? What does Omoluabi mean? These 2 concepts are as African as they come. Ubuntu says, I am because you are. I respect your dignity. I recognize you as a human person, and I respect you for that. That's what human rights is. That is what, when you do it online, that's what digital rights means. The same thing, Omoluabi says that I will respect you because I am a nice and kind person because I'm African. So there is none of the things I've talked about with you today that is a foreign concept. They are not, in quotes, global concepts. They are Ghanaian concepts. They are African concepts. There's a reason why when you go into the restroom, when you go into the toilet, you close the door and there is no camera there. There can never be a camera in the toilet. No matter how secure the facility is, there is no camera in the toilet. Why? Because it is nobody's business to watch when you are doing your business. That is the concept of privacy. It is not borrowed from anywhere. When a woman is giving birth, they say men go out, including even the husband. I'm not telling you what happens in hospitals now. These days, the men, there's a male doctor, there are men and all that. Original concept of childbirth in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Africa, the men are away. So these are that I about. Our concepts, they're as Ghanaian, as Nigerian, as Cameroonian as they come. Unfortunately, many of us have also been victims of colonialism. And so the colonialists have come to give the impression that they were the ones that discovered River Niger. They were the ones that discovered the Volta region. If the people who took you there, how did they know how to get there? Someone said, oh, I'm the one that discovered the source of River Nile. You must be stupid, because the people that took you there to the source of River Nile, how did they know the place? You didn't discover it. You only put it in a book. They knew it. They live there. So none of these things that I'm sharing, and you will read our reports, and you will see that we clearly explain these are concepts that are African as they come, applicable in other places, but I'm an African first. And so the principles that I expect are African principles that are applicable globally. I'm afraid those may be the only 2 questions that I can take. My 2 o'clock is looking at me right now, and I have to go. My apologies, but this will continue, and I'll share my slides with Sarata and Raymond, and they can share with you. But I hope this has been useful. Someone asked the question here, do I do mentorship? Yes, I always give everyone my email address, but unfortunately, what I say is that more often than not, people don't get in touch for serious things, for mentorship. I mean, they may share other things and things like that, but if you're serious about mentorship, anyone who has ever written me by email about mentorship, they know I'm serious about it. The worst that could happen is to let you know that I'm busy within a particular window and we should have another time to meet and talk. But yes, I believe very strongly in mentorship. I got that chance myself, and now that I'm beginning to have some gray hair, you can't see it because the screen is not showing the colors properly. I'm also trying to do as much mentorship as possible myself. But please get in touch if you have any other questions. And I wish you the very best as you continue the rest of your week at the physical presentations at GhanaSIG.